Hi, and welcome to a Lavacon webinar. I am Jesse Freeman, Lavacon's Marketing Director and your host for today's webinar. The Lavacon Conference is a conference on content strategy. It's a gathering place for your senior content professionals. Visit lavacon.org for more information on this year's conference in Portland. First, some quick housekeeping. Everyone has been muted and the webinar will run just under an hour. Please enter any questions for today's speaker in the question box or the chat box, whichever you feel better doing. Today's speaker is Habib, CEO of Cadorba, who will be presenting thousands of words, one brand voice, style guides, content flows, and AI. May, are you ready?
Hi, everyone. I am Jesse. Fantastic. So I am May Habib. I am the CEO of Cadorba. We at the company talk to content strategists every day and feel really privileged to have the feeling of being shoulder to shoulder with content strategists, as it feels like they're both growing their footprints within their organizations and really developing their industry as a whole. We sell to lots of different types of people in an organization and definitely feel that content strategists are really the best positioned to make the kind of meaningful contribution to content quality that a lot of people aspire to. So over the past few months, three really, we've done two reports where we went out to leaders in the industry. So the first report is our Style Guide Benchmark report, which we hope we'll do regularly. And we looked at how organizations were using content style guides and what they were putting into them. And the second report, our State of Content Strategy report, surveyed hundreds of content strategists this past spring. And I'm excited to talk to you about the changes and trends we're seeing in content strategy, particularly in how all of you are really scaling the function. Okay, cool. So let's dive in a bit of an outline of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start with where are we now? So what are the challenges that we've heard in talking to hundreds of you that content strategists are today facing? That's number one. Number two is what are content strategists doing to really evangelize their strategic output, whether that output is brand voice, whether that's workflow, the change they want to see in the organization, what are they doing to do that? Thirdly, we'll talk about the kinds of tech that folks are using to execute on content strategy. And then we will finish up with some of the really interesting survey results that we found in chatting with everybody. Okay, so to start with the first topic and align on the state of the world now. Firstly, it really feels from surveying talking to you that the field of content strategy is still a world of haves and have-nots. So what do we mean by this? In the world of haves, the content strategists and organizations are almost acting like ministers without portfolios. They have a large and broad mandate, which is absolutely fantastic. There is buy-in from the top, which is great. They still need to empower and evangelize. So when you're lacking tools, that can be tough. But these folks are in a really good position to be able to actually implement and execute and grow the strategy which they develop. In the world of have-nots, the content strategists are in. They may not have the title of content strategist, and they're also kind of lacking the buy-in and, as a result, the budget. And that's par for the course of what we've seen for content strategists to have an ill-defined scope. So kind of number one of where we're at today, it really feels like a world of haves and have-nots. Secondly, from talking to everybody, it definitely feels like the content strategy world is undergoing the same revolution that designers had 10 years ago. In 10 years, 15 years, however you want to start the clock, designers did a really good job advocating for themselves to get a seat at the table. And now there's not a product team anywhere that doesn't have both a design sprint and a product sprint in shipping features out the door. And designers did a really good job not only of getting a seat at the table in the product world, but also specializing to manage scope creep. And definitely feels like there's a great analogy here for content strategists, especially in the product world. Thirdly, for both the haves and the have-nots, content strategists are still trying to figure out how to scale themselves. And this question of scale is where it's most obvious, I think, as an industry, that we are far off where the field of design has gotten to. If you think about a designer's role, a design system is absolutely key to consistent product UX production. And we don't have that same analogy in the content world for most organizations. To expound on this just a little bit, scale means a whole company writing with one voice. So we do that in visual design, right? A creative lead sets a direction, a core group of designers create a design system, and then dozens and dozens of designers can really crank out components that feel like part of a coherent whole. Of course, it's not perfect, and it's still that is still an ideal for a lot of organizations, but it's absolutely possible. And in best-in-class product orgs, that's absolutely what's happening. The second piece is that scale means content strategists are brought into the work early. Right? Right now, it feels like a lot of you told us that you're brought in the final stretch to do your magic. And without the kind of insight into the earlier stages of the process, it's definitely, it can be a fail for content. We've heard of customers who have told us that they've set up their own separate content sprints that parallel the product sprint, which is really cool, but that definitely is not the norm for a lot of folks, and it's not the best way to create content. Scale also means that content strategists have systems in tech to support their workflows, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later. But certainly designers have lots of tools to allow them to create beautiful and powerful designs, wireframe their ideas, collaborate with colleagues. We really, as an industry, need a whole suite of tools to be built, next-gen content tools that enable that for content people. Scale also means mitigating scope creep. And we definitely hear this a lot from folks. Companies need to create so much content, right? From sales and customer emails to proposals and slide decks. And a lot of that has nothing to do with content strategists' core day-to-day job. And in a role that is already stretched thin and lacking in sufficient resources, we definitely feel that you're saying, asking content strategists to review more and more content is absolutely unsupportable. And it's probably undesirable, right? Designers have succeeded by specialization. And as a result, we've avoided in the design world these kind of megalithic, unmanageable roles. We have brand designers and product designers, core component designers, design system designers, and that's just in the product world, right? Marketing has their own sets of designers too. So we need to find a way as an industry to really make it okay and comfortable for content strategists to say yes to systems, no to scope creep, where they're having to review every single word. So, overall, the problem we need to solve for is how can content strategists do their work, right? Set the strategy, evangelize one way of writing, whether that's voice, tone, style, approach to user interactions across the entire company, so that they don't need to get their eyes and ears on every word that goes out. So this is kind of a summary of where we're at from as an industry, from the data that we gathered from all of you. Let's go into a little bit about some of the demographic information that we gathered. This is actually one of my favorite outcomes of the survey specifically. It shows us so much about where we are, and some of it was a little counterfactual to where we at Cordova thought the industry was, so that was really exciting. I didn't mention this at the beginning, but the survey is the result of 400 respondents, content strategists, who very thoughtfully went through a pretty long survey. So thanks to everybody who participated, maybe some of you on the phone. Okay, so first up, what industries are content strategists in? And this has definitely followed a kind of more conventional kind of route that we see when new roles have emerged in organizations specifically related to kind of digital and product. So no surprise there. The largest portion of you work in technology. Education being really a close second was definitely a surprise for us. We definitely thought it would be some of the more commercial verticals. So that was pretty exciting because if you think about the challenges that folks in the education sector face, there's the content types are quite different. And then most of you, or the right after that, the greatest number being free agents. That was also very exciting too. What's nice about an industry with a lot of free agents is technology and innovation moves really quickly through, and feels like that's a great vehicle for a lot of the change that we're about to see kind of really permeating everybody's work. So that was a pretty exciting kind of set of findings. The next slide is around a question we asked around where content strategists sit in teams. And here we were also surprised. We definitely thought UX and design would be the biggest chunk of folks. A lot of that probably has to do with kind of our experience bias as a company. We work with a lot of product teams, and it was great to see that almost a third of the industry is in marketing roles, and I see that's great because as we'll see in a bit, a lot of the guidelines come from marketing, and so for the content strategist to really sit there means they get a full purview, everything from comms to marketing to product. To that end, the second biggest group after marketing sat in this cross-functional hub. And we've seen a lot of folks do content center of excellence type things. At Apple, a lot of the really kind of best performing, we think, tech content teams are thinking about content cross-functionally, and that's been great to see. We didn't do this last year. My guess is if we had done it last year, that number would have been below 10%. So it's fantastic to see how big that's gone in a really, really short period of time. So UX design, kind of a cross-functional center of excellence, and marketing are the biggest areas in the company where content strategists are sitting. The type of content people are working on was also very eye-opening. Certainly kind of digital marketing content, we expect it to be pretty high up. But a lot of you guys are writing emails. A lot of you are working on the internal communications. A lot of you are working on documentation. And actually, on the next slide, we kind of wrote out where folks are spending their time. And it's in addition to content strategists touching a lot of different types of content. The same content strategist is owning a larger number than we thought of different modal types. And that's tough because you are context switching often, even in the course of a single morning or a single afternoon, as we read through some of the quotes that people put in. And especially when you think about the folks who have been most successful at specializing their content role, I would say folks who have specialized in UX copywriting and content strategy, almost half of them are still working on marketing content. So, there's a natural evolution to new roles in organizations. And so I don't think that this is dissimilar to what other functions have gone through. But it's interesting that even when we have achieved some specialization, there's still kind of that pull to help out other parts of the organization. So we thought that we could ask a poll. We like this feature of, hopefully it'll work. Would love to get to know a little bit about the attendees on the phone, and so we will do a number of these polls before we open it up to Q&A at the end. But given the state of the world is that the content strategists are sitting either in marketing or in these cross-functional hubs, and you're working on lots of different content coming across the organization, if you had to choose kind of one part of your org that could be completely consistent and on brand, which team needs this unification the most? Would be interesting to get folks' points of view on that, and we'll share the results of the poll at the end, I believe. Yes. Cool. Okay, so and that will stay open until probably the next poll. No, it'll stay open for. It'll close soon. So answer your question. Okay. Cool. All right. So. We'll move on as soon as we close the poll. Give us 1 second. Poll is closed. Okay, cool. Do we have the results yet, or do we?
We do. Would you like to share them to the attendees?
Yeah, that would be great. Let's see. Okay, fantastic. And that makes a lot of sense. If you think about the fact that there are a lot of different contributors in marketing, I'm surprised that UX is so close to marketing. That's fantastic. Part of that probably is that a lot of the engineers and don't necessarily want touching content and website. Cool. Okay, fantastic. And Jesse, how many people responded?
73%.
Okay, fantastic. Wow, thanks everybody. Cool. That is that's really helpful. So moving into the next part of the chat with all of you. So we talked about from our survey and the benchmark report where it feels like the industry is. We gave you a little bit of background into the demographics of our respondents. We'd love to move into some of the solutions that came out of the conversations with folks. And you know, some of this is our positioning, but we really just read through a lot of the free text responses, which was fantastic, and folks did some great sharing in those responses. Number one is really about bulldozing the silos, and this almost sounds like the opposite of what we want to be doing. I did talk a lot about earlier managing scope and preventing scope creep, but this is different. What we're saying is content strategy is a very collaborative role by nature. It requires setting strategies and then executing those often enough through various workflows that it results in a coherent whole. And when we asked content strategists about how they define success, right? So much of it was really about improving internal processes. I love some of these quotes, right? We're successful if people understand that content strategy is not writing, that content needs to be part of the design process. It's not something that just gets filled in at the end. And then I really liked this one. Content and narrative is the key differentiator that sets us apart from competitors. Storytelling is the oldest technology. That's written on our vision page. We say that a lot. And being able to have everybody tell that story is really important, and it's really hard. I mean, we are a company at Cordova that produces a tool for this group of folks, and you know, it's something that we have to work on constantly. So success is having everybody, right, following, at least attempting to follow the strategies, the guidelines, the protocols. You know, when 200 people in an org across marketing, comms, and product can all write as one, that is absolutely success. And you that really means breaking down the silos that separate the different parts of the company when it comes to content. So it's interesting, when we do ask, where in the organization do you sit? It'll be interesting to benchmark against that, 22, 23% number in the next few years. Our hunch is that all of you are cross-functional in the next 2 or 3 years. Okay, so we asked folks, again, within the Bulldoze the Silos rubric, what are some of their top priorities for content strategy, and this was a completely unprompted. This was the question stood alone in terms of their top priorities, but it was really interesting that 2 of the 4 top priorities are related to process improvement, right? Improving cross-functional collaboration and processes. That was literally the #1 thing that our 400+ respondents said. And then improving processes for content management, governance, and control, which is by definition cross-functional. So, half of the priorities, of the top priorities for content strategists, have to do with cross-functional collaboration, which says a lot. #2 of the solution findings, or kind of within the silos question, was really about finding allies across the organization. And what we asked was, we asked folks to agree or disagree with a statement, and got lots of great free-form responses after this question as well. And lots of folks are kind of split on this question. So the ability for you to really create allies across the organization is a predictor of success, and we heard that pretty often. Scott, who a lot of you probably know, talks about finding allies in the organization that are like-minded, that think in terms of processes and systems. And, unsurprisingly, those folks can be engineers. And so I really like the way that he positioned it, rather than engineers being the enemy, and, the folks who are blockers or are kind of taking over part of the content strategy role or making QA harder, etc. Really thinking of them as allies and system thinkers who with you can help evangelize an efficient, repeatable way to make content a de facto part of the content and product development and release processes. So we like that quite a bit. Poll #2, and this one I would love to hear the answer in a kind of really quick fashion. Who are your top work allies across the org? So we'll keep this open for a couple minutes, and then we'll see what we'll share the findings. I'm glad I know how to do this now. Jesse, feel free to share the answers once you feel like most people have responded already.
And that was 89% of people.
Okay, wonderful. Designers, wow, that's awesome. That is really wonderful. And that makes sense, right? Now, I think it's probably harder for marketing content than for product content. What's great about product content is sprint upon sprint, the mocks build on each other. And so designers love having real, live, actual content in designs. And so we definitely see this a lot, where there's a lot of pull from them to content to make sure that their designs are true to life. Engineering, marketing, and execs. Okay, cool. So just about after design takes the cake by a lot, and then we're pretty evenly split. I'd be interested in our Q&A at the end to really think about other and hear from you who some of those folks are, or maybe type it into the chat. Cool. Okay, so the second big category of findings around solutioning is around the tooling. And if you think about designers in the design world, they've got apps for design and wireframing and real-time collaboration and design systems and giving feedback, getting feedback. We have spreadsheets and Word docs. So there's some really basic tooling, the basics of which are, how do I put all of my content guidelines in one place? We did ask a set of questions. I actually don't have the pie chart for this question in the presentation, but we did ask, I have the data, how will AI impact content development? And it really feels like we are split. So about a third of you agree or strongly agree, a bit more than a third. But 40% agree that AI is definitely going to impact content development and content strategy. But a good 35% have no opinion. And then another 15% disagree or strongly disagree. So, can AI help content strategists today? Absolutely. And we're seeing it across diverse industries from tech to industrials. The role of content strategist is strategy, and rolling that out to the rest of the organization can absolutely be aided by technology. It's helping content strategists in more places at once by providing some of the first rounds of editing and feedback. It's allowing teams to scale without adding headcount. But there are some really basic needs that content strategists have really around replacing those spreadsheets and PDFs that still need to be met. And we're also hearing that the teams are really craving better, more integrated workflows. One team that we work with completely blocks engineering builds when content doesn't meet minimum standards, and a lot of folks are really trying to build in content QA into the development cycle. You can use, obviously, Cordova to automate that, but you don't need a separate tool if you get buy-in from a process perspective, right? This is really about where and when does content QA happen from a process perspective, and tooling can be a process in and of itself. So we heard a lot about folks wanting and needing tools. Thirdly, around solutions, what's great about a heuristic is it's a almost subconscious rule. And when you are a small team of content strategists and you've got hundreds of people across your org that are putting out content that represent the brand, you need broad rules of thumb. And those can be style guides, they can be term lists, they can be strategies, but they absolutely need to be easy to access, easy to read, as to encourage usage, and easy for anyone from UX writers to documentation writers to understand and apply. We hear this a lot from folks that we talk to. If it's a Word doc or a PDF that's on your desktop, that's not nearly as useful. Even if it, is beyond that and it's a Google slideware, it still needs to be easily understood and applicable and applied to what somebody in your organization is trying to write. We, in our style guide benchmarking report, asked folks who, and this is, obviously they're the customers, so they had a tool for style guides, but how many style guides were they maintaining? And the average was a lot higher than we thought it would be, actually. It was 4. And so actually, it'd be interesting to drill down. Maybe we can share this with participants later, but I don't have the data on what the four have broken out into, but you can imagine it's things like marketing content versus training content versus UX. Cordoba uses Cordoba, and so on our team, we've got kind of our main term bank and style guide, and then product support has one that is broader, where lots of different terms have very specific meanings, and so they need a broader content style guide for that purpose. So average is 4. We've got folks with 12. Obviously, that's on the high end, and almost everyone has 1, which is not surprising. We also dug through the style guides that folks were creating to understand brand voice and tone, and we dug through hundreds of enterprise customer style guides and actually read them, so it wasn't just kind of data processing. For the kind of brand and tone guidelines people are recommending, and as our customers skew to the tech industry, we definitely have a average voice here that reflects that. Folks really striving to be as simple as possible and as clear as possible. And then I would say probably on the kind of emotionality, really seeking to engage users and be quite personal and energetic. Folks have wanted to be pretty neutral when it comes to kind of gender tone, and not too informal, not too formal, probably just straight down the middle. I was surprised by that. I was expecting a bit more style guides to be informal, but that's also probably because from a company size perspective, we skew on the larger side from a customer base. So we thought that was pretty interesting. There is a set of settings in our product around plain language usage that was also interesting enough to kind of call out here. We're seeing a lot more teams trying out privacy, plain language guidelines for things like privacy policies and TNCs, terms and conditions, especially as there's been so much controversy, political controversy around very confusing and complex privacy policies. Consumers really seeking to understand how tech companies are using and monetizing their data. We're seeing a lot more folks looking at the content through plain language guideline perspective. And you know, at the very basic level, are sentences long and hard to understand. The more simple and straightforward the paragraph and sentence structure is, the easier it is for a user to digest the information. And we definitely have seen people seek to rewrite content to meet with and comply with plain language guidelines. So that's on tooling. Another big part of the survey that we'd like to share is around really buy-in and budget. Before we go there, would love to kind of close out that section that we just had with another poll. And this is really kind of seeking to understand where guidelines come from. And we've been pretty surprised. I'm not going to pollute the findings by telling you what we've been surprised by, but this definitely looks different across industries. So we'd be interested to know who created your content style guide. Let's give you guys a couple minutes to respond. Okay, Jesse, once you've gone to a good percentage, let us know.
That was 82%.
Okay, great. Cool. Yeah, marketing being number one, and then content strategy. Yes, exactly. Communications. It was definitely a lot higher than we thought as well in the conversations that we've been having over the last few months. We didn't ask this question in specifically in our survey, which is why we're asking it now. Um, another big other write-in. So would love to see it in the chat, what folks mean by other, if it's not marketing, comms, content strategy, or UX. Fantastic to see UX so high up as well. I definitely think we probably wouldn't have seen that so high even just a year or a couple years ago. Cool. Okay, so another big thing that we heard from folks in the two surveys are that organizations absolutely need to support strategists for the strategy to go anywhere. And we asked 3 questions here that were pretty telling. Basically, do you have buy-in, do you have budget, and do you think the budget's going to increase? And the results are really exciting. You know, we kicked off the webinar saying that it feels like a field that's on the cusp of a really kind of de facto place in the hierarchy, and it definitely feels like we're on the cusp of that because, you know, absolutely the best way for us to measure strategic impact to an org is whether money flows to that function. And so if we go into kind of the buy-in slide, do you have a hard time getting buy-in for your priorities? We definitely have, you know, a third of you saying absolutely not, right? A third saying yes, and then a little less than a third saying really not sure. And so, you know, that is exciting because definitely feels last year to this year, right? This is our second year really being in this community. That definitely feels like a lot higher anecdotally, folks saying, no, absolutely not. I get a lot of buy-in for what I'm doing from what that looked like before. The second question, do you have the budget that you need to really act on the content strategy goals that you've got? And again, we've got a mix here. About 30% are agreeing or disagreeing, which I really want to know what that means. More people than not having the budget that they need. And so, you know, you need buy-in first, budget follows buy-in. So, you know, it makes sense that more people have buy-in than have budget for the time being, but that's also a number that really feels like it's on the positive side, grown a lot in the last year or two that we've been talking to people in the industry. And then the really exciting finding is a very large, almost majority of you expect your organizations to increase investments in content strategy. So that is really exciting, and actually only 20% don't. So that's great. It really means that folks are investing in headcount. We didn't ask this as a follow-up, but certainly anecdotally as we dug in, what are people getting budget for? And the vast majority of it is headcount, which is fantastic because two content strategists, when there are 200 people who are writing on behalf of the org in some way or other, is definitely a lot. And so headcount is absolutely the place to start. So that is from a kind of results perspective, I would say the highlights of talking to hundreds of you at once, which is always really great. Very excited to get into Q&A. To wrap up a little bit of what we've talked about, kind of the big takeaways are number one, getting content strategy earlier in the process, getting a seat at that table, and helping yourself get there faster through allies and keeping them close, Allies on the engineering and design side are fantastic. Those are folks who are already primed to be thinking in terms of process and systems, and so they are very natural allies. And we saw a little bit of that come up in this live poll as well. Another takeaway is around technology, really using what you can get your hands on to maintain a consistent voice, turning style guidelines that you write into heuristics that can be used by the rest of the organization, whether that's by making them omnipresent, making them easy to understand, putting them in tooling, but really creating actionable advice based on your strategy is really important. And then finally, if you are in management and are listening to this and you're hiring content strategists, then you definitely have a responsibility to help support their strategies with buy-in and budget, or else it's very hard for that strategy to have a business impact. So that is a summary of our findings. Really excited to have shared this with the Lavacon community. Thank you, Jesse, for helping us put this together. We're really excited to take some questions from everybody. And
I actually have 2 comments for the others. One of them includes the communications and public relations department.
Okay, cool. So this is on the poll around who's writing content guidelines?
Correct.
We are, okay. Mm-hmm.
And then the other one was TechCom. We created our own style guide. Other content creators don't have one, and they don't use ours either.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I like that.
One question for you. They missed the number of orgs you surveyed. So how many did you survey, and were they all enterprise size?
Yeah, really good question. So we interviewed 400 people. I'll have to get the exact number of orgs, but I believe it was probably over 300, but we can get that exact number and share that. There are a few people who worked at the same org from my recollection. So the number of orgs was probably pretty close to 400. It was very representative of folks who attended a content strategy conference held in the spring, not Lavacon, and the industry breakout and kind of company size breakout definitely skewed enterprise. Great question.
Thank you.
Yep.
And tell us one more time how attendees can get a hold of you if they have any questions they didn't want to ask in public.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very simply may@cordoba.com. I live in my inbox, and so would absolutely love to have offline chats with folks and help them dig into the data. Both reports are on our site, cordoba.com/blog, and folks who want to dig into any parts of it should definitely reach out, and would love to share the data and chat further.
And there was another question, will we be sharing a recording of the slides? Yes, we will. Those will go out in a few days.
Great, thanks, Justin.
We will also be including a discount code if anybody wants to come to the Lavacon conference who also attended this webinar. So that'll be in the email as well.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Jesse.
You're welcome. All right, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Great chat. Thanks for participating.